Hey, what's up? Zach here. And these are the biggest pros and cons of the all-new Kyrie Low 5 and all the biggest reasons you may or may not want to buy them. Here we go. Now, the most eye-popping feature of the Low 5s is just how not low they really are. If you look, the only reason that they are a little bit lower than the Kyrie Infinities is they do have a swooped ankle collar. Now, that actually does make a big difference though. Because whether the sneaker has a more continuous ankle collar like in the Infinities or a swooped ankle collar like in the Low 5s, it's gonna fit a much different type of playing style. A more swooped in ankle collar gives you a lot more degrees of freedom. It kind of feels like your ankle just has a little bit more motion available to it. You just feel a little bit lighter in the shoe, even if the shoe isn't all that much lighter than something with a continuous ankle collar. The bad part about that swooped ankle collar is just sometimes people don't feel as confident playing basketball, especially moving side to side or in the paint with that lower swooped in ankle collar. That's why you see a lot of signature shoes have a more consistent high or kind of flat collar to the ankle. It just gives you a lot more confidence moving side to side, and when you're making really hard pivots or cuts, it is kind of nice to have more substantial material right beside your ankle when you're really having to pivot hard, especially when going up against maybe a larger center or guard. What I found really interesting about the Low 5s is that their uppers are just as sturdy as in the Kyrie Infinity, just in kind of different ways. Because the main body, the uppers of the Low 5s, is still that plastic mesh material, but what you do get on the Low 5s is a few little panels here where the shoelace eyelets integrate. Now, what I like about the Low 5s is you have integrations on the tab as well as in the shoelace eyelet line, and that eyelet line is actually reinforced with even harder plastic, which does give you a tremendous lockdown, which I love. My bad part is those laces are pretty cheap, so if you are going to get these, I probably would get a little bit more of a premium shoelace. I'll leave some link in the description. Now, what I like about these panels is they do go all the way under the upper and into the strobo board, as well as here on the medial or inside, so it is going to give you a little bit more arch support. And ironically, my favorite part of the Kyrie Infinities was this really bulky, more premium material padded tongue. However, in the Low 5s, I actually almost like this a little bit better. It is a really big bunted tongue. It's super bulky. It gives you a lot of protection. It just feels really good on the top of your foot. When you're really lacing the laces really hard down, you still don't feel anything. And it kind of almost looks more like a 90s model type shoe with it. So I just kind of like the styling of it a little bit better than in the Infinity. But you know, for a more low top model shoe, I actually like this setup just a tad more than in the Infinity. And if you look at the upper durability test, the Dremel 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, just like a lot of Nike's other more plastic based upper meshes, it's really excellent durability, barely a scratch on this. It did kind of wear down the sheen layer on the outside, the stuff that makes that little noise. However, it still did hold up, did not get through that first layer. The only bad part about that mesh is that it does have bunting underneath of it. So I found that these shoes did trap heat and trap moisture just like in the Infinities. So even though these are a low top shoe, maybe a little bit more of like a teardown type shoe, they will still hold on to heat because they are still more of a substantial upper. Getting into the midsole teardown, the Kyrie Low 5s kind of remind me of the LeBron Witness 6 in this part of the shoe, that you have a little bit more of a harder, denser Nike Phylon here in the middle of the shoe, and there's really no shank. There's really nothing holding up the shoe or stress shielding it except for the hardness and density of the foam. Now, you do have one zoom area unit here in the forefoot. It is pretty narrow, however, it does cover the entire ball of the foot, so you are getting a little bit of forgiveness in the front part of the shoe. However, no real rigid beam in the middle, no real cantilever bending, nothing that's going to give you a lot of reverb. If you look at the jump height test, about 34.5 centimeters, which is really nothing special. However, this shoe is brand new when I do that test as well as the shuttle test, so I'm getting the max performance out of these shoes. So I really would expect that as soon as you use these a few times, especially if you're a heavier, taller player, that foam is going to start to bottom a little bit sooner. So if you do want these shoes to last longer, I probably would throw an insert in these just to give something to stress shield all that foam. However, if you are looking for somebody with a lower heel to toe drop shoe, this is one of those where the arch is actually higher than the heel, so the heel to toe drop kind of artificially isn't all that high. So if you're looking for something that low drop, these actually are a decent pickup. Now, the outsole tread of the Low 5s, I have to admit, I liked a lot more than the Infinity 8. It is still a regenerative pattern, however, it is a different pattern than on the Infinity 8. What's nice about this is it has more of almost a quasi herringbone feel here in the forefoot than it has kind of a periphery, almost as in something like the Dame 8. So when you're pushing off laterally or kind of when you're off balance pushing off in the shoe, you still do get a little bit of a more decent grip versus in the Infinity Infinities where I did find myself slipping and sliding a little bit until the rubber warmed. On the low 5s, I really did not find that at all. I felt that the tread kind of sunk into the hardwood and really grabbed the outdoor courts really well, which also makes these a pretty decent pickup for a carpet court too. But on the flip side of that enhanced traction does come a little less durability. Now this is the XDR version of the shoe, and on the outsole durability test, the Dremel 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, about 1.5 millimeters of damage, which is not something I'm used to seeing with an XDR rubber shoe. Typically those are not getting really 1 millimeter of damage. Now the durometer on the rubber was an even 10, which kind of falls right in the middle of the Nike XDR family that I have tested this year. However, just with that resistance to abrasion, these just aren't as good as other XDR rubbers. They are still a pretty hard rubber compound, so if you don't play with a lot of friction, or if you play indoors, you probably will still be okay. However, if you are playing outdoors and do produce a lot of friction, these might end up wearing down on you. But I think with all that being said about the outsole, if you're somebody looking for a little bit more of a compromise, something that's going to grip a little bit better on an indoor court but has more of the XDR properties, something that's going to give you a little bit more traction, a little more grip and grit, these actually might be a decent compromise. If you look at the Shuttle Test, I mean 14.90 seconds, and that was on a very slick outdoor court after a little bit of a rain patch that we've had. So these shoes were still gripping incredibly well, and I did feel super confident in these, even though they don't have the really wide flange of the Infinities. I felt like that rubber was almost sinking into the court, and therefore my foot was almost sinking into the court. So I did get a lot of tactile sensation out of that rubber. So there are some good and bad to these. I just think you kind of got to be the right player to appreciate this type of outsole rubber. But by far the most polarizing part of the low 5s is their fit, because these are not a wide fitting shoe by any means. Even in the XDR family, I found because these are so tapered inward, they have such a flare to them, that if you're narrow or medium, these are going to fit really well, especially with the increased lockdown and the really nice padded tongue. These are going to be a dream come true for you. However, if you are a wide foot, even just a 2E, I found my left foot was actually falling asleep in these a few times. Even when I was just wearing these to work, I was still getting cramping enough to where that lateral dorsocutaneous nerve, which is the nerve that goes on the outside of your foot, was starting to kind of fall asleep on me. And then when I was playing and swelling in them, that even compounded. So I'd say if you're not a narrow or medium foot, I just look somewhere else. And like a lot of these other dense foam as a shank type shoes, they're going to give you a lot of arch support initially because the foam is so built up here in the arch. So if you are a lighter weight player and you don't bottom out foam all that quick, you're going to get some decent arch support. Just watch that because it is going to start to bottom. So like I said before, throw an orthotic in there and you will get a little more longevity out of these. But what I noticed playing in the low 5s is that because it has that zoom area under the ball of the foot, and because it has a higher stack of foam in the arch, you do get a lot of bulk under your big toe joint. So if you are trying to push off from awkward positions or just trying to push off from one foot or trying to hit some fadeaways, these actually are pretty decent for that, especially from those awkward positions. And because the rubber is a little softer, it kind of gives a little more on the court, you can get a little bit more of a tacky, agile movement on the court. So if you are someone that likes to kind of outwork your opponent with footwork, these actually would be a decent pickup if you do have a narrow medium foot. And so I noticed that these, more than a lot of other shoes in the XDR family, they will grip any court really without any rubber warming. And if you're really kind of going down with high speed or in low speed type cornering, they'll give you the same kind of really good grip and push off from that pivot. And another thing I really liked about the low 5s playing in them is they almost had the same profile as the Zoom Freak 3, but just with a lot more stability. So if you're looking for a shoe that can kind of cut through the air pretty quick, a little more aerodynamic, easier on the straights going up and down the court, these are actually a lot better of a compromise versus the Zoom Freak 3, at least in my opinion. But I gotta say, this is where it's good that there's like kind of a bigger shoe tuber community out there, because when I put these on, my foot kept falling asleep. I kept thinking, like, is my foot just getting bigger? Is my foot just getting flatter or more like a pancake? And then I actually went and watched the wear testers review of these, and they were saying the exact same thing. So I do think it is a little bit of just at least either a feature or a bug of these, that they are just not the typical XDR or EP version shoe. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on the low 5, especially in comparison to the Infinities. Are you looking to go for more the stripped down model, or are you looking to go with the flagship? Let me know in the comments down below. And speaking of the flagship line, if you want to see my deep dive and tear down into the Kyrie Infinity or Kyrie 8 or whatever you want to call it, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you in the next video.